Hey everyone, David Chen here. I recently had a chance to watch I'm Thinking of Ending Things, Charlie Kaufman's new film based on the novel by Ian Reid. This film is ostensibly about a woman going to meet her boyfriend's parents, and when she arrives at his house, unexplainable things start happening. It's super creepy, upsetting, and like all of Charlie Kaufman's work, I found the film very evocative and powerful. I knew I'd need to spend a lot of time figuring out what exactly happened in this movie, what are the secrets of this film, so I've done quite a bit of reading, and here are my thoughts and my interpretations on what is going on in I'm Thinking of Ending Things. Now, before we begin, I just want to acknowledge that this is my interpretation, so if you have your interpretation, that's great. I want to hear about it. Leave it in the comments below, and while you're down there, hit like or subscribe. Make sure you hit that bell icon. You'll get a notification every single time I post a new video. I post pretty regularly about film, TV, and tech, as well as some of my own personal vlogs, so I hope you take a look around the channel and find something you enjoy. I also want to acknowledge that I didn't get a chance to get to every single thing in this movie. This movie is very rich, it's very deep. You could spend a lot of time studying it. So if there's other things that I missed, again, feel free to leave it in the comments below. And of course, spoilers for the movie will follow. So you should assume there's spoilers starting right now from Thinking of Ending Things. I also want to mention that this YouTube video will deal with some serious subject matter, including suicide. So just be warned about that. So let's start. What is actually happening throughout the course of this movie? There are a few different interpretations, but here's the one I think makes the most sense. When you're watching the movie, you think it takes place from the perspective of Jake's girlfriend, played by Jessie Buckley. But in fact, the entire film actually exists from the perspective and in the mind of Jake, who's played by Jesse Plemons. Now, Jake is also the old guy we see as a janitor throughout the movie in these like brief little shots. Jesse Plemons and the janitor guy are the same guy and kind of different points in their lives. What do we know about Jake? He's been working at his high school for 30 years, and he's contemplating suicide because his life ultimately hasn't amounted to very much. He never left his home, he never left his house, he took care of his parents until they died. He watches talented high schoolers at the school, they graduate, they often go on to bigger and better things. So when Jake's girlfriend is saying, I'm thinking of ending things, it's actually mirroring Jake's own thoughts on his life. He's thinking of ending things and of committing suicide. And at the end of the film, he does. What we see throughout the film is simply an elaborate fantasy that older Jake is making up. He's flashing back in time and reminiscing about a girl he once saw at a trivia night. And in actuality, he never asked for her phone number, but he's thinking to himself, what if he did? What if he had the nerve to ask her for her phone number? Would this person have helped to give his life meaning? Would she have kind of turned the course of his entire existence? This explains why Jake's girlfriend changes throughout the course of the movie. Her name changes, her interests and her hobbies change, her appearance and her clothing changes. At one point, she changes into a completely different person, this woman from the Robert Zemeckis movie that older Jake is watching. The reason she's changing the entire time is because he doesn't know anything about this woman, because he saw her in a bar once. So he's just making it all up as he goes along. You might also be wondering, why does this woman keep copying other people's work? For instance, at one point she recites a poem in the car, but then we later find out that the poem is actually a pre-existing poem, Bone Dog by Eva HD. Later, she starts quoting Pauline Kael's review of Woman Under the Influence and performing it as Kael. The reason, again, for all this is because this woman is a fiction of Jake's imagination, right? And at one point, we see Jake's room and we see it has books and DVDs, and we see there's Pauline Kael, there's this book by Eva HD, and all these things that he's used to kind of craft this woman in his imagination. And he's kind of trying out different identities for her as the movie goes on. But in addition to this, Kaufman as a filmmaker is trying to also make a broader point about how we're influenced by all the things around us. In the end, we are kind of the result of all the things we read, the people we talk to, the movies we watch. And it can be very difficult to understand where our influences end and where we actually begin. And the movie kind of raises this question. But like from a plot perspective, it's really that Jake is just trying to figure out who this person is. And so she's an amalgamation of all of his different interests, which we can see in his room. Also, there's plenty of other Easter eggs in the room if you freeze frame it. Like there is a book by William Wordsworth and David Foster Wallace, and these books come up in their conversation. And you see on the DVD cases, there's like lasting memories of sorrow, futile efforts at success, things that someone might reflect on as they are about to potentially end their own life. So the entire story is really just a reflection of Jake's psyche. Let's move on to what is going on with Jake's parents. Throughout the course of the movie, we see Jake's parents transform in physical appearance. Jake says his mom needs to be taken care of and she wouldn't be able to cook, but then she seems to be in fine health when they arrive at the house and there's a bountiful feast at the table. Jake's dad has a Band-Aid on his head and it changes position. We later see Jake's dad much older, and then we see Jake's dad much younger, and then we see Jake himself taking care of his mom while she's old and then in her deathbed. So what is going on here? Jake is creating this fantasy with this woman, but he doesn't know where exactly in the timeline of his life to slot it into. He doesn't know where to put his fake girlfriend, basically. He's trying out all these different things. He's kind of Tetrising her into different scenarios. Like, maybe I met her when my parents were young and youthful. Maybe I met her when my parents were about to die. And he's kind of trying to figure out what works the best for this fantasy. And of course, what he finds is that even in his fantasy, the girlfriend rejects him. It's this profoundly depressing idea. Like, even in your dreams, the thing you make up to like give you comfort is still rejecting you. And that's kind of how profoundly broken this Jake character is. It's interesting to reflect on the character of Jake's girlfriend, given that Charlie Kaufman wrote Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which has one of the prototypical examples of the concept of the manic pixie dream girl. This is kind of a reversal of that in the sense that, like, yes, the character played by Jessie Buckley is kind of like a manic pixie dream girl in that she's supposed to unlock Jake's potential and improve his life. But Charlie Kaufman's like turning it around and saying like, hey, this is actually like the fantasy of an extremely sad, depressed, and broken man, and kind of interrogating the idea that way. So take that for what you will. It almost feels like a reckoning for Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. It's his Irishman to Goodfellas, right? This is like, I'm thinking of ending things versus, Eternal Sunshine for you. Let's talk about what's up with the phone calls. In the book, the protagonist, who is the girlfriend, keeps receiving phone calls from her own number. But in the film, since she's using an iPhone and because her name changes throughout, in the film you can see she's getting calls from herself, right, in the caller ID. When she answers, she hears a weird voice repeating things. It sounds something like this.
There's only one question to resolve. I'm scared. I feel a little crazy here, not lucid. The assumptions are right. I can feel my fear growing. Now is the time for the answer. Just one question to answer.
What this is it's Jake's own thoughts intruding on his own fantasy, right? It's like calling her out of the fantasy. And he's asking one question. There's only one question to resolve. And in the book, we discover that question is, what are you waiting for? What are you waiting for? What are you waiting for to kill yourself, ultimately? That's the question he's asking himself. And again, very, very upsetting. So what is going on in the basement of Jake's house? Why is Jake trying to stop his girlfriend from going into the basement? The answer to that question is that Jake is trying to stop his fantasy girlfriend from discovering the truth of his existence. The book and the film are both told from the perspective of Jake's girlfriend, and in the film, when Jake's girlfriend goes down into the basement, she finds a washing machine with Jake's janitor outfits. She also discovers paintings that he has made that she thought were her own. The truth of the matter is Jake never left the house. He still lives there. He was there when his parents died. And he is there now, and he never left his hometown, his house, never achieved his theoretically full potential. The paintings being another sign, along with like the photo on the wall earlier in the film, that Jake and this woman, his girlfriend, are the same person, because it's someone that Jake made up. Later on in the film, Jake and his girlfriend leave his house and they make a stop at Tulsi Town, which is a kind of Dairy Queen-esque ice cream shop. Apparently, they actually tried to get Dairy Queen's permission to use the name and the brand, but Dairy Queen would not grant it, so they ended up making up a fake one. And I actually think it works better. It makes it more mysterious. You don't know that much about it. But yeah, Tulsi Town. What's going on there? Jake seems really nervous around the girls that appear there, and he doesn't want to talk to them. And I think what's happening is it's like girls that he's encountered at the school, either as a janitor or when he was there as a younger man. You do see a flashback of like what seems to be older Jake walking by the girl with the rash. And so it's just kind of another interface of Jake interacting with his past and his present at the school. Indiewire has a great article about this film featuring Charlie Kaufman himself, and according to Kaufman, quote, there was this idea that there were many generations of high school kids who worked there that he had interacted with over the years and had his problems with. It's a dreamy stop into his psyche, into his past, end quote. A couple of other details to pick up from this scene. There is an encounter that Jake's girlfriend has with the brown-haired girl behind the counter. And when Jake hands her the money, you see that they both have the same rash, which I think is kind of a sign that Jake's making up this girl, that she's kind of in his mind. There's also this very odd line about varnish in the movie.
Sorry about the smell. They're doing some varnishing in the back.
So what's up with the varnish line? The book indicates that the janitor, old Jake, has been varnishing the floors of the school without protection from the vapors, and that this might be contributing to his state of mind and potentially like making him more imbalanced and unstable. But in the movie, they don't really explain any of that, so it's kind of just a weird line that's just hanging out there without any explanation. But that's the explanation that I've been able to come up with about that varnish line. So then Jake and his girlfriend arrive at the school, and Jake's girlfriend goes into the school, and then the truth comes out, which is that Jake's girlfriend never really met Jake in the first place.
Nothing happened. Just one of thousands of such non-interactions.
And it's here when you start to get a sense that this whole thing is a fantasy in Jake's mind. And this whole scene, this whole sequence, I think, is about Jake really finally letting go of his fantasy and embracing death. So what's up with this ballet sequence? Well, the ballet sequence is an invention for the film by Charlie Kaufman. It's not in the book, and it's from the musical Oklahoma. It's taken from the Dream ballet sequence in Oklahoma. Oklahoma, for those who don't know, is a musical that features a love story at the center of it between two characters, Laurie and Curly. And there's also this character named Judd who's just trying to muck things up in the musical. And Laurie does not like Judd, although Judd likes Laurie. His feelings are unrequited, and it leads to some rather sad consequences for Judd. In an article at Vanity Fair about the movie and about this sequence in particular, my frequent podcast collaborator Joanna Robinson wrote, quote, "In Jake's own mind, he has cast his younger self as Curly, and the young woman is, of course, his Laurie. But just as he does in Oklahoma, the musical's villainous farmhand, Judd Fry, breaks into the fantasy and ruins the romance. This role is filled by the janitor, aka older Jake. In other words, in this moment, Jake is forced to reckon with the notion that he's not the Curly of this or any story. He's not the handsome leading man. He's the frustrated, lonely villain," end quote. In the film, we see this play out when older janitor Jake murders his younger, more idealized self. It's Jake finally letting go of his fantasy, succumbing to death, acknowledging his own place in the story, which is that he's the villain, he's the bad guy, he is the loser of his own story. So what was up with that naked Jake and the pig? Earlier, Jake tells a story of a pig that's died, and it makes him reflect upon how brutal life on the farm can be. So why the naked man? Well, in the book, Jake stabs himself to death in the high school. However, in the film, I think it's implied that he freezes to death in his car. Perhaps he gets hypothermia. I'm not 100% sure about this, but it is a common symptom of hypothermia that eventually the body stops trying to regulate itself and contract its blood vessels, and it just allows blood to rush towards the extremities. People engage in something called paradoxical undressing, where they remove their clothes even though it's freezing outside. It's possible this is what we're seeing at the end. Jake freezing to death, and he's just like undressing, seeing the pig, followed by one final hallucination. So what is happening in the final scene of the movie exactly? A few things to unpack. Number one, it's actually a replica of a scene in Ron Howard's Academy Award-winning film, A Beautiful Mind. You might not have recognized it if you're not a huge Ron Howard fan, but it is a very close recreation of that scene with the speech that John Nash gives at the podium. He's played by Russell Crowe in that movie. Why is this scene recreating A Beautiful Mind, and why does everyone have old age makeup on? Well, according to an interview with Charlie Kaufman in Indiewire, there was a scene where the janitor found a makeup book in the bathroom, and so kind of incorporates it into his fantasy. It's not in the film, but that's why everyone's wearing the old age makeup. So why A Beautiful Mind? Well, we did see the movie earlier in Jake's room in a DVD on Jake's bookshelf. And according to Charlie Kaufman in this Indiewire piece, quote, "All of the people who were in the audience, with the exception of the characters from the movie, are the extras who played high school kids in the rest of the movie. So they're all young people wearing old age makeup. This movie is dealing with somebody's experience of absorbing things that they see and how they become part of his psyche. So this was in some ways how this person might have fantasized it out," end quote. So Jake has basically taken the ending of A Beautiful Mind, this triumphant moment that John Nash has, and kind of incorporated it into the ending of his own story, the ending of his own life. It's a moment that kind of mirrors something from one of Charlie Kaufman's other movies, Synecdoche in New York, where Caden Cattard says something along the lines of, like, we're each the main character in our own story. You know, we're each the hero of our own tale. And in this movie, Jake is the protagonist of his own story. And this is him ending his life as triumphantly as he can. In the final scene of the movie, Jake sings Lonely Room. It's a song in Oklahoma that Judd sings about how unlovable he is. And in this movie, Jake sings it, seemingly accepting his station in life. As the movie ends, we see old Jake's truck in the parking lot covered in snow. It's a sign that he never made it out of the school in more ways than one. All right, so what do we make of all that? There's a scene earlier in the film where Jake talks about the lies that we're told. Things like, it'll always get better, it's always darkest before the dawn, God has a purpose for everything. And Jake's life has been the process of realizing that all those things are lies, right? That none of it's true. These are things that we as humans just tell ourselves to feel better about existence, about the fact that maybe there is no reason why all this is here and why we're here. This is a profoundly sad and depressing movie, a glimpse into a very disturbed person's final moments. And it's one I'm going to be thinking about for a really long time. It's one that's really stayed with me, and it's one that you can study and really consider and debate and reflect on. And I think that is what makes for a great work of art. It's definitely not for everyone. It's arguably Charlie Kaufman's least accessible work. But it is something that I really, really appreciate it, and I was very, very moved by, very impacted by. So I hope you enjoyed this video trying to explain what the hell was going on in this film, and I hope you enjoyed the movie as well. Before we close, I want to thank all the executive producers of my YouTube channel and my podcast, Culturally Relevant. I want to give a thanks to Jeff Evans, Mario Rivera, Stephen Austin, Jonathan Sutton, Felidia Featherbottom, Christopher Yimon, and Dan Flanagan. All these people contributed to my Patreon at patreon.com/Dave Chen at the executive producer level, and they make the work I do possible. If you want to become a patron, check out patreon.com/Dave Chen. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you want to watch more videos, subscribe, like, hit that bell icon. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.